It's snowing out. Gonna get down about 10 degrees tomorrow night. I'm all crippled up, my bad elbow, and hardly walk. Sinus infection. I'm not going out there. Guess what? We're gonna have another story. I didn't know what story to tell, so I kind of opened up my computer, went down through my pictures. They're all in different files. I came to one that said Moose Hunt 1972. Well, that's 50 years ago. So I'm going to tell my Moose Hunt 1972 story. 1972, I bought a brand new car. It was a Chevrolet Malibu. Had, I think, leather seats and all kinds of neat stuff in it. One of the first 8-track, for music, whatever, the big cartridges. And what was really amazing, I paid cash for it. It was only about $3,000. That's another story. Anyway, what happened was I was talking to the sales manager, and he had come back a few months earlier from a moose hunt. And he was getting ready to go again. So what I did, I questioned him about it. He had gone to Alberta. So I got home and told my dad about it. He thought about it, and he talked to his friend Glenn Belden over in Grisdale, Washington. He was the road grade operator for Camp Grisdale in the Simpson logging country over there. And they decided, well, let's go moose hunt. And so we signed up with Joe Hug Outfitters in Alberta, Canada. We were in the Smoky River drainage. Now, the Smoky River runs into the Peace River, which runs into the Hudson Bay? I think so. Anyway, it runs north. And we were up in the, what they call Little Smoky River, which ran into the Big Smoky River. Now, we were somewhere between Grand Cache, Valley View, places like that. I'm not sure exactly where we had ended up eventually. But anyway, that whole country in the 1970s was being explored for gas and oil. And so what they did all through that country is they run these seismic roads. And these roads would run back up into the hills and just keep on going and going and going. And they were drilling. I don't know if they're doing test wells or if they put the hot seismic probe down into the well, but every quarter mile or so, they drill down with a drill rig and see what the structure of the land was, whether or not it held gas and oil. And staying close to the wood stove this morning. A little nippy out there. Oh, that's good coffee. Talking about coffee, that'll be part of the story. Oh, let's get started with our story. 1972 moose hunt. Now, in the 1950s and 60s, there's a lot of people hunted and fished. I mean, it was part of society back then. A lot more than there is now. I grew up in the, went to school, grew up in the Puget Sound area, and the country as a whole, in the last 50 years, there's twice as many people living in this country as there was back then, in 1960 or so, 70. And if, I was in the Puget Sound area, because I lived either around Auburn or Enumclaw or whatever, and, well, my gosh, the population of that area is 3 or 4 times what it was at that time. Growing up as a kid, we left Auburn and drove by car to Seattle up the valley roads, there's no freeways, nothing. That was all Japanese truck gardens. So yeah, that country's been pretty well, I don't know if it can grow anymore. I don't know how to get any more people in there. Anyway, let's get on with the story, and I'll start showing all the pictures and the slides that I took back at that time, and tell a few stories. This was my dad's friend that came along with us. His name was Glenn. I think it was Belden, his last name. Anyway, he was the road grade operator for the Camp Grisdale logging camp that Simpson Logging had. And his job was to grade the roads, all the logging roads, all the way from, I think from the Skokomish River almost over to Aberdeen. I mean, he was on the Hump Tulips, Wainuchi, Satsip drainages. Hundreds of miles, I think, of logging roads back there, and it was his job to keep them graded. I asked him one time if he ever saw anything interesting. And he says, like what? I said, have you ever seen a Bigfoot? He said, no. But he was convinced that at that time in the late 60s that there still was a pack of wolves working that southern Olympic Peninsula and up into the park. So I don't know, but he knew where all the elk were and all the bear were and everything else because he drove those roads every day. The environment in that area was pretty much rolling hills. And of course, everything was crisscrossed with seismic roads. I don't know how far apart those roads were, but man, they ran for miles and miles and miles. But I guess it's what you call a boreal forest. They're white and black spruce, balsam fir, jack pine, and of course there's aspen and poplar trees. And I think I saw some tamarack trees also in that area. This is typical of what it looked like. These roads seem to be pretty straight, up and down short little hills, little gullies. I never saw any deep canyons or high hills or mountains anywhere. Of course, we didn't have much daylight either. And what was interesting, it seemed to snow a little bit every night. I hardly ever saw the stars. Got up every morning, there'd be an inch or two of fresh snow just like this. This is about what it looked like at high noon. But you can see those roads are straight as an arrow. And what we did is we stood along the roads and waited for a moose to come out. When we first got there, we were told that when the moose crossed these roads, they step out, stop, and look both ways. And they said that's the time you're supposed to make your shot before they dash across to the other side. When we did see the sun, all it did was come up a little bit above the horizon and circle around us until it disappeared. I spent most of my time with the, it was a 1960s model snowmobile or snow machine. Very heavy metal, all steel, had an old bubble nose on it. Notice everybody's wearing all the early down coats. You had to have felt-lined packed boots, and you needed mittens instead of gloves because they were much warmer than gloves. Temperatures were about 5 to 20 degrees during the day. Sometimes we get a little snow. Most snow we had was between maybe 10 to 12 inches. This snowmobile or snow machine, here's a close-up of it. Very heavy to move and lift. And like I said, I spent a lot of time on this thing. You can see the can of fuel in the foreground. I remember I had to fuel it up a lot. At night, when it got dark, I had to travel in this thing, maybe a quarter mile down a narrow, winding trail to where there was a small creek where there was running water. So I would go down there and collect water for everybody and for the camp. Like I said, I can't remember the model or the date of this snow machine, other than it was pretty early model. Like I said, I'd be wandering around out in the dark in this thing at night. It was quite interesting. I had a couple of close calls, and a lot of times I had a hard time keeping it on the trail. It seemed to snow a couple of inches every night, and one thing about this old snow machine is that you had to stop once in a while and tip it over and knock the ice out. I don't know if it's, well, a lot of times you're going through muskeg and water areas, and then you go into other areas where you're freezing cold. So yeah, it had a lot of ice buildup, and there'd be a lot of times I'd have to stop. This is Joe here, Joe Hug, and the outfitter. But yeah, we had to stop, and he showed me how to remove the ice and the snow buildup on this thing. Here's the front view of the snow machine. Rounded front, and the front ski was a single ski, not a double. So he had a single ski, and then he had a big track on each side, kind of like a tank or something. This thing was very heavy. About all you could do would be pick up the back end and slide it over. You couldn't lift it up. On the left is my great uncle, or my dad's uncle Frank, there with the double hat and double coat on. And the guy on the right, I can't remember his name, but he was from Sequim, Washington. On the right there, you can see the Canadian truck, a Fargo. I don't know what year it was. Here's another view of the snow machine. These are the guys getting ready to go out after lunch. We normally went out, we got dropped off before daylight, and we'd watch these long seismic road cuts, and then they'd pick us all up again at lunch and bring us back in the bog trotter, and after lunch we go out and sit and watch again for moose in the evening. Joe Hug continually had a cigarette in his mouth, and what really amazed me, he'd go around gassing up the snow machine, the bog trotter, and the generators and everything with fuel, and he'd be smoking a cigarette. I said, Joe, aren't you afraid of killing yourself, you know? And he said, no, when it get that cold, he says a cigarette won't set off gasoline. I said, well, I'm not going to try it. Here comes Joe again, cigarette in mouth, packing his rifle. Most of the guys were using 30-06s. My dad and my uncle were using Model 99 Savages. I was kind of responsible for the snow machine, you know, that big heavy snow machine. And there wasn't any water at the camp, so I had to go wind around through this trail through all the trees and stuff, and there'd be a spring had come up, and I just filled the buckets with the spring and fill the containers and take the snow machine back. Well, I almost did that always at night, and then of course I'd ride other places at night, trails and whatever, cruising around there with that snow machine. And that thing was so heavy, if you ever got sideways on it, really hard to lift that thing up. But anyway, I still can't figure it out, but I'm just going down these trails just fine as everything in the dark, and then tried it a couple times in daylight. I couldn't stay on the trail. I kept rolling over or flipping over, get turned sideways or something in that snow machine. I don't know how I got through there at night, but just fine. I couldn't make it during the day. I was just always had to stop and move myself over one way or the other. You know, you can't back them up. You know, and it was heavy and it was very old. I don't know what year it was. I have no idea. I do think it may have been a Skidoo, possibly. I'm not sure. Besides the snow machines, Joe Hug Outfitters had a couple of, well, I guess you call them snow cats or something. This particular one I think was Canadian made, and was used in the oil business up there. Track vehicles for the snow and other areas. Had two big tracks on it, a cab. Came with a winch and little crane and all kinds of other equipment. They had two of them. One was running, and I think the other they were cannibalizing. Anyway, this is Charlie up here, and they called it the bog trotter. Here's another view of the bog trotter. every morning we'd all climb up on this thing, and Joe would run us out to out these different seismic roads, and then drop us off, and we'd wait and see if a moose came by. Anyway, yeah, I'm not sure what the make of this thing is, but they had two of them, and boy, they sure could go places. They also used a lot of fuel. Well, this is Mrs. Joe Hug. Can't remember her first name. She was the camp cook. I do know she was from Hungary because we met her mother, who was living with them, and she spoke no English. And she spent her whole time watching television, and her favorite shows was American football. Yeah, here's my great Uncle Frank, all decked out, ready to go in the bog trotter. As you can see, climbing up onto this thing wasn't that easy, and I kind of had to help each other get up onto it. Here's the guy standing next to the other snowcat they had, and I never saw it running, and I saw a lot of wrenches and hammers, and well, I think they were cannibalizing that one for parts, but I'm not sure. Yeah, every night after dinner they put on these pots of coffee, and everybody drink coffee in the evening or whatever. And Joe's wife, who was the cook there in the cook shed tent area, and the tent area was a big large tent with some side tents that went to the side, you know, where everybody slept in kind of bunks they had built. And what was amazing is that Joe, of course, he smoked all the time. But Joe Hug, who was the top operator and owned the business, he'd sit there all night long with his own pot of coffee. And there would be a couple going there for us, and then there was one for him. And it was nabob coffee, I remember that. Anyway, he's drinking all this coffee and talking, whatever, goes to bed. And one of the guys the next morning says, I watched Joe drink 1.5, pots of coffee himself. He says, he never got up and go to the bathroom. So everybody kind of took turns watching at night to see if he ever got up and went outside to the bathroom. Or he even went to the bathroom in the tent. He didn't. He didn't go to the bathroom. He got up the next morning. So we don't know how that guy held that much coffee, but that was one of the side things of the trip. Now here's a nice eater that the gentleman from Squim got. Look at the size of that gut pile. But anyway, the food we had was, average food, but we sure enjoyed those nights eating fresh moose liver. Boy, that stuff is just plain delicious. Back in 1972, I believe it still was either sex moose at that time of year in Alberta. I'm not sure. But this is a nice young one here. Another good eater. Can't eat horns. But like I said, this is about the 10th or 12th of November. That's when we were up there. Here's another small, medium-sized moose. Not a big rack on it, but another good eater. That's Charlie on the left, Joe's hired partner there. And anyway, they're getting ready to load the moose on top of the bog trotter or snowcat, and they had a winch for doing that. Here a nice sized moose has been loaded on the back of the snowcat. Pretty slick way of doing things. That vehicle could go just about anywhere, and having that big little crane and having a good winch was very helpful in a lot of circumstances. The guy from Squim always wanted to get his picture taken. Anyway, well, that's interesting. I'm trying to figure out who that is diving into the cab there on the bug trotter. It's hard to tell. Joe's helper, Charlie, he gutted out all the moose, and when we got back, he's the one that skinned them out and did a lot of the work. So you guys really had to spend most of their time hunting and not taking care of meat. That picture looks like a Chinese fire drill. Got people climbing all over that thing. That snowcat. I don't know who got swung out on the door there, hanging for their life. Yeah, pretty funny in a way. That was part of the, going north to Canada to go moose hunting. Part of the deal is some of the interesting people you meet. By the orange hat and the way the guy's built, I say that was probably the owner of the outfitter, Joe Hugg. He was probably reaching for more cigarettes. This guy had I swear he even slept at night with a cigarette. He was smoking continually. Did I get a moose? No. Like I said before, I took my Savage 99, Model 99, and I didn't have a scope. So I'd see a glimpse of a moose or so in a distance 100, 150 yards away, and I didn't want to try to make a wild shot, so I never got close to anything since I had open sights. This is the outside meat shed. In November, the bears up in that country have actually hibernated. They're not like our Alaska brown bears. They're true hibernators up there, and so they were able to take down the electric fence and all kinds of other things, keep the bears away. This is where the moose were brought in, quartered up, skinned, and taken care of. They would skin the moose first, and then they'd quarter it up using a chainsaw, which I thought was interesting. But, well, I guess that's the way they did it up there. Here's where the guys started to unload one of the moose. Here's Charlie. He's skinning the moose. Having these bog trotters, they called them, these cats, boy, it made hunting easier, dropping us off, picking us up, picking up the moose, bringing them back, hauling fuel, food, everything else. I mean, having one of these machines is a real advantage. And great Uncle Frank there with his double hat. And there's Joe Hugg again. Hey, he doesn't have a cigarette in his mouth. He must have ran out for a while. More moose coming in. Another picture of the bog trouter. Take a look at interesting looking tracks on that thing. Not quite like a tank. I think it had rubber tires in the middle and then sprocket on each end. But boy, it just about go anywhere. Well, there's Charlie again with the chainsaw. Kind of looks like something from the movie, The Chainsaw Massacre. I have a horror film with all the blood, guts, and pieces of moose, and oh, what a mess. Another view of the meat shed with the moose hanging here. In the evening, nothing to do, whatever, they'd start processing some of the moose, some of the guys. So it'd be easier to handle and take home with them. Run, Charlie, run. Joe would keep Charlie running around all the time. Kept this guy busy. He earned his money. A picture of our home for 5 days. We spent 5 nights there. Picture of my dad, Bob Rice.
loading some of the moose meat in the back of the, I think that was his big truck with a big, like, not a camper, but kind of, it was an area where he stored a lot of stuff. When we showed up, it was full of fuel and food, and when we left, it was full of moose meat. Another picture of the noontime sun, just barely above the horizon. Bog trotter coming up a little incline. Like I said, it was mostly kind of rolling hills, not more than maybe 200 feet high. After a quick, hot noonday meal, well, everybody climbed on again and went back out hunting. The four-wheel drive truck that was hauling supplies back and forth got stuck a lot in the snow. Many times we had to stop and get the cable out, and they had to either attach it to a tree or a stump and then use the come-along or use the winch to pull the pickup truck out of the bog or mud it had fallen into. These seismic roads were straight, so they went through anything. So you go over a hill or into some woods, but it also go up into the muskeg, and where it went across the muskeg, it was really wet and soggy. Even when it was, 10, 20 degrees out, you could still break through getting into the mud there. Pretty tough going sometimes. Many times we were blocked by fallen trees. Here's Charlie cutting one out with a chainsaw so we can get the bog trotter through it. Because the country up there was rather flat like this, and well, you really didn't want to go back up in the woods very far unless you were leaving tracks or flagging or something. So it was always safer to do your walking around here on these seismic roads that were cut through, because too much of the country looked alike. And that time of year the sun didn't come up very far, so you couldn't really tell which is north, south, or whatever. You just presumed that the sun was south somewhere. There were 6 of us all together. Of course, I've got the camera. For the first time, I don't see the guy from Squim in the picture. Anyway, my dad's on the right, and his friend Glenn there is on his left. We traveled together up there. Chopping up some more moose. A little midday sun coming through. Yeah, a picture of where Joe lives, Joe Hug and his wife. Guys are all getting ready, loading gear into vehicles and deciding which vehicles to leave and which ones to take and which ones to drop off. You notice the Alaska camper there up to the front on the right. I used to have one of those. I had one in the 1970s, mid-70s, I think. A lot of fun, those Alaska campers. Yeah, transferring fuel barrels from one vehicle to another here. They went through a lot of fuel. Everything was operated inside, I believe, with either white gas stoves and lanterns. There was some propane. There was a big diesel heater stove in the middle of the camp, in the tent there. Of course, all the vehicles used a lot of fuel, a lot of gasoline, snow machines and so forth. So we were always moving and at least helping move, transfer fuel from one vehicle to the next and fueling things up. Yes, that's what you think it is. That's the bathroom right there. And let me tell you, you didn't put your you-know-what down on the seat, or it'd have been stuck and froze there. What was interesting is you had to go really bad, so you went and, dropped your drawers, and then that cold air come up from that hole down there, and it hit you really hard, and you'd think, I don't know what I'm doing here. You might even want to leave before you got your job done. It was cold. Transporting 55-gallon drums of either diesel or gasoline again. Guys heading out at lunch again. Most of my pictures were taken, around noontime because I had a very old Argus 35mm camera with Kodachrome film. So, I didn't have a light meter and I couldn't take too many pictures, none at all at night. And early in the morning, late in the evening, there wasn't much light. And the pictures I did take at that time came out pretty blurry. I did get a few good pictures at sunset. And here's the moon and at night in the town we stayed in when we first arrived. There was one area that had a lot of little hills like this and ravines. When it came to moving fuel and heavy boxes and meat, everybody kind of, jumped in to help. Joe Hugg was a pretty good operator. He had all the equipment, all the stuff he needed. So, actually all he had to show up with is have the proper clothes for the weather, your sleeping bag, your gun, and whatever else you wanted to bring. Everything else was provided. In the area where Joe lived, there was a great big lumber mill. You can see the old beehive burner up there for burning the waste wood. This is pretty much a typical operation for the, early mid-1970s. A lot of men went north to Canada to go moose hunting. There are quite a few outfitters. But this, like I said, is up on the Little Smoky River in Alberta. Well, that was my first and only trip moose hunting in Canada. Was it worth it? Oh yes, for me it was fun. Did I get a moose? No. I should have put a scope on my rifle. I didn't do it. Of course, I was just used to hunting in Washington State, and we snuck up on our deer and 30, 40 yards away, made a shot and went home. This was a little different, long range shooting. Should have had a scope. But also, there's no pictures of me. Well, I was the cameraman. That's why. Like I said, back in 1972, you had an old 35mm camera and Kodachrome film. And, I didn't like today with all the fancy equipment and digital photography and instant gratification because you can see the picture you just took. All the stuff I took, I had to take home, send to the processor, have them all processed and sent back. You don't know if you had a good picture or not. It was always a crapshoot. I eventually did get a moose in my life. I went moose hunting when we lived up in Dillingham in the mid-1990s. I think it was 96, maybe 97, up on the Muskegs River. Well, that's another story.
When they dropped us off on those seismic roads, to watch for moose, a lot of times you'd be on a corner and you could look out this way and you could look out that way or a long stretch. I did see 3 moose, and each time they did exactly what they told me they were going to do. They were going to walk out in the middle and stop and look both ways and then cut across the road there. And but each time I saw one, I'm sure well over 100 yards, and put that open scope, on that rifle of mine. I didn't want to take a chance. The last thing I wanted to do was, wound a moose, and then the guys have to go hunt it down or whatever. So yeah, that was my big mistake up there was, not having a scope on my rifle. But that's just the way it is.
Well, that was moose hunting in 1972. This is one of the big bulls that I don't know if my dad or my great uncle got that one. But it was fun to look at all the old equipment, wasn't it? I mean, the trucks and the vehicles. Hey, look at that galvanized garbage can. That was a real garbage can. make noise with it, and put water in it, and do all kinds of things. A lot better than this plastic crap we got nowadays. Anyway, you know, you got to see a lot of old vehicles and equipment. And I wish I had taken more video and pictures of different guns people were using. Like I said, I think 3 of us, Glenn, my dad, and myself, were using Savage Model 99s. And there again, I wish I brought my scope. I had a scope for it. But hey, look at that Jeep in the background. Isn't that cool? Yeah, and one good thing about going moose hunting in middle to late November is that you don't have to worry about, you know, refrigerating the meat, you know, because everything comes down nice and cool from Canada. It would, from our house in Auburn, Washington, it would take about, better part of a day to drive up to northern Alberta. You could do it one trip, but it's a long drive. I mean, you're way up above Jasper Park up there. Boy, look at that moose meat. Wow, I just love moose. I love moose ribs, especially when you leave a lot of meat on the bones. And moose liver. I'm afraid I really like moose liver. But that, you know, that's kind of neat to look at all that stuff. All those old vehicles, and see our old house there in Auburn, Washington.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. I'll probably have to do a few more because I'm having a hard time getting out now. And you know, I hurt that elbow about 2-3 months ago when I fell down. It never seems to get better. So I should have it go looked at, but I don't like doctors. I figure they can go practice on somebody else. So anyway, I appreciate you watching my videos, and I'll have a few more old ones. Some like the moose hunting video. They're going to be over 50 years or older. So it's kind of cool looking at all the old trucks and equipment, clothing and guns and things like that. So until next time. Bye.